The important goal of liberals is not only to reflect the seriousness, the sheer massive weight of existence, but also to be free-flowing free thinkers. We can float above grim reality and gain comic perspective on almost everything to further our ability to see accurately. Not to mention it's a lot more fun that way. Okay, now back to seriousness. Harboring hosts of expectations is another fundamentalism that prevents free thinking. And if our expectations aren't fulfilled, many of us file lawsuits of bitterness against politics, life, or the universe. That is a huge tragedy causing massive amounts of apathy. But also, having traditional expectations may prevent us from having great expectations. I think the greatest miracles in history may have occurred in the last 50 years, including the formation of the European Community, the American Civil Rights Movement, culminating the election of Obama, and the USSR just up and quitting the Cold War. All were unprecedented in history and arguably never could have been predicted. They may have been miracles. Anyway, another way to put it is that it's almost impossible to judge the state of our collective unconscious, or to judge what humanity is cooking up just below the surface reality. We may be on the verge of a massive miracle right now. The events in Wisconsin, it's like rolling the dice. Who knows where that's going to end up? So we keep working on liberal causes with the enhanced expectation of unforeseen transformations just under the surface. Is peace on earth, plenty for all, radiant new levels of happiness, just a few fractured fundamentalisms away? No one knows. And so atheists can believe in miracles almost as fervently as fundamentalist Christians. C'est la vie of a free thinker. Or maybe nothing will happen. That means we should enjoy life as much as we can, or feel like. In addition, with only about 150 years of rigorous application of the scientific method, we're now living with the awesome, exponential growth and powers of science and engineering. What will our mastery of the mystery look like in 10,000 years? Another in 100,000 years? Will we be able to rejuvenate suns and direct galaxies? To prevent the Milky Way from colliding with the Hydra Centaurus supercluster? That is, if we or an errant asteroid doesn't destroy civilization first. Okay. Now that we've journeyed to the outermost reaches of thinking, from the total amoral void of absolute meaninglessness to the total moral weight of absolute meaning, it's now possible to look at the immense institution of our economy with a free-thinking vision that is relatively unobscured by mountains of propaganda, and to assign meanings only to that part of it that we think are meaningful. Most people believe the U.S. economy is capitalism. But what is that? Vonnegut says it's what people with all the money, drunk or sober, sane or insane, feel like doing today. But despite endless hype, capitalism is really only self-interest expressed in the economic realm. And since self-interest is possibly the most powerful motivation among humanity, the idea of getting rid of capitalism is as sensible as trying to get rid of breathing. But thanks in large part to brilliant aspects of capitalism, our productive forces have become so powerful, intelligent, and mechanized that I think we can now easily produce a guaranteed, dignified living standard with very humane working hours and conditions for a population-controlled number of people. If we could rationalize the economy to this extent, there would be no real cause for our current financial panic. Then we all could feel secure and rested enough to be more active citizens with long-term political views on the health of society. Instead, we're often controlled by the short-term terrible terrors about paying the rent or the mortgage, or frantic frenzies about whether we can afford the latest flat 60-inch liquid crystal, high-def, surround sound, 3D TV. But the current economic reality is a gigantic amount of waste. And though trash, both in the dumps and in our lives, is a great part of that, much of the waste is harder to see. For instance, we all now know all too well what derivatives are. We found out that they are the stock market side bets of financiers, like pork belly or energy futures, that produce nothing concrete. Meanwhile, according to Newsweek, the American gross domestic product, the GDP, that is, the actual concrete goods and services produced, was valued in 2008 at about $14 trillion. And the entire world's GDP, $61 trillion. But the derivatives were valued at over $600 trillion. I find the immensity of that figure hard to believe, but the derivatives called bundle mortgages probably just brought down the world economy. And so it's also probably true that we now worship fundamentalist capitalism so much that we were willing to let frivolous side bets inundate and so potentially destroy the basic health of our economy. Our future may be totally controlled by gambling addicts contributing little but different ways to roll the dice. Talk about hilarious, amoral, moral, meaningless. Talking about the dark ages. A spectrum of theoretical possibilities of a rationally mixed public-private free economy might look like spectrum number 4 on your handout. Of course, there's a lot of areas in between the words on the page. In a possibly meaningless universe, we are free to choose any mixture of capitalism and socialism, anarchy and libertarianism that we think best. Okay. Now I know all this talk about dark ages is depressing, but it has its very bright side. It means that we have immense possibilities for progress, that we're only scratching the surface of how our society can be arranged, that humanity probably has vast, surprising horizons of untapped human potential and hope. C'est la free thinking vie. So let's get totally free thinking. And also, let's get to being as kind as possible to one another and to not be like Nietzsche when he attacked Christianity using these words. When we hear the ancient bells growling on Sunday morning, we ask ourselves, is this really possible? This for a man crucified 2,000 years ago who said he was God's son? For a God who begets children with mortal woman? For fear of the beyond to which death is a portal? And the fact that this claim is believed, whereas one is otherwise so strict in examining pretensions, is perhaps the most ancient piece of this heritage. How ghoulishly all this touches us from the tomb of the primeval past. Well, it turns out this quote got back to Jesus. And he got special dispensation from God to confront Nietzsche in Hades. Jesus temporarily became pure spirit in order to slip past the guard dog Cerberus, who was, as usual, barking his 3 fool heads off. The guardian of Hades, Charon, ferried the now reincarnate Jesus across the raging river Styx and hung around a referee in the gigantic